Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for this invitation to speak to such an excellent and diverse audience of educators. I'm humbled and grateful to be here, even if it's only virtually. Today, I want to talk about the project that AFTAC has undertaken with 10 schools. I'll be talking about 5 of them who are working with the visual arts. I've called the presentation Art, It's About Thinking. And it's not just that art is about thinking. Art is also about feeling and expression and many things. But I really want to emphasize the thinking nature of the arts because I think that is what makes it such a powerful tool for integrating and learning in connection with other subjects. What AFTAC is doing is serving as a bridge between high-quality research that's been conducted on creativity and thinking and the arts outside of the Hong Kong context, and then translating them into the Hong Kong context. The goal is to keep students and their thinking at the center of learning. It's important to remember that critical and creative thinking support each other in a number of ways, and we'll be exploring some of those in this presentation. But one thing is that we need to meet students where they are, and often creative thinking is a way to get them to unpack and tune into where they are, and then to take them further. And often that's through a combination of critical and creative thinking. And the goal of all of this is to build the higher order thinking skills of critical and creative thinking for every single student, not just for gifted students, and not just for students who have the luxury of working in small classes. Some of the students in these schools were in classes of 60. Creative classrooms, what is that? Well, it's a place where thinking and emotional engagement are part and parcel of what's going on all the time in sustained engagement. And traditional classrooms, we're saying, is more focused on skill development. So developing the craft of various disciplines, techniques in various disciplines. Now, in working to shift from traditional to creative classrooms, we need to realize that they are not at odds. They really support each other. The traditional classroom techniques will be very useful in a creative classroom. They just need to be arranged differently, and there needs to be more surrounding them. Teaching and learning are going to toggle between doing and thinking. Skills and techniques that are taught in traditional methods support creative expression if you teach them in the context of fascinating work. If you take them out and just teach them as freestanding, then kids won't know what to do with them. So you want to teach them as a way to support expression and as skills that are needed in order to express. Skills can't do that by themselves. They need to be used to a focused purpose in a creative context. The studio thinking framework has 8 dispositions by which we mean, they're thinking dispositions, by which we mean that they have skill. They also have what we call inclination, which is a motivation or a drive or a passion to use the skill, and the alertness to recognize when using the skill would be beneficial. We've just come out with our 3rd edition of this book. It's been very well received across the world. So what AFTAC has done is combined these frameworks and various others to reframe them into a Hong Kong accessible context for the first year of this project, these 7 tools and skills. They've wanted to reduce the complexity and focus on inquisitiveness and imaginativeness. So they have 7, and I've numbered them here so that I could talk about them a little easier. Observe and listen, in the way I would talk about that as observe, which is, close looking, looking time, looking from multiple perspectives. Imagine is another one. From my perspective, I would think of that as envisioning, which is seeing what's not physically there. It's only what's in the head. And it could be about processes, it can be about objects, it can be about images. And stretch and explore, which is the capacity to play with materials, to play with ideas, to play in ways that allow us to go beyond our skill level and to make mistakes. And when we make mistakes, we use them as opportunity. So stretch and explore really turns mistakes and error on its head, because it says, no, they're inevitable. And when they happen, let's notice and let's use them. Let's not hide from them or pretend they don't happen or that we can avoid them. Feel and value, in my terms, would be about express, and the engage part of engage and persist. So expression is about meaning. It's about expressing meaning through feelings, of ideas, of concepts, and conveying that to other people. And valuing is focusing on what it is I want to express, what engages me, what matters to me. And then the last two, they're not last. This is not a linear process. It's a very nonlinear and sequential, and I mean, not very non-sequential, very dynamic and cyclical. Reflect and interpret. From my perspective, those are captured in the reflect habit of mind, which requires question and explain, that is talking about what's going on, writing about what's going on, and evaluate, which is judging the quality of what is happening. And it's not just the quality of work, but the quality of thought, the quality of process, judging quality. So there are also a couple of studio habits that haven't been yet named for the teachers. Develop craft is one, and I think that may be because the teachers are so good at it that they don't really need to think hard about developing skill. However, it would be useful to think about developing skill, not just the skill of developing skill, developing craft, but also the inclination to develop craft. How can we build that in our students? And also an alertness to when skill matters and what kinds of skills matters. When should we use the skills that we have? Engage and persist is also very evident, but it hasn't been named. This, by having multiple steps in the projects, the students are persisting in developing an idea over time. And Understand Art Worlds has two parts. One is about the works that other people have made across time and space, and also how artists work together in communities, practices of critique and collaboration and sharing. So I want to talk today about why art is so powerful and how art is so powerful in an integration process, how it helps to develop thinking in other dimensions, other disciplines, as well as within art itself. And we're going to use the student work from the Year 1 project, where they focused on inquisitiveness and imaginativeness. And the purpose is cultivating critical and creative thinking in art and another subject, so that we can transition teaching from traditional to creative classrooms. And remember, those are not opposed. So here's what we want to be able to do. We're going to look at the work, and it looks good, or maybe you don't think it looks good. Maybe you think it doesn't look good. But how do we know whether it is good? We have to decide what good is. And so we look to the deeper foundations and structures behind the work, such as the studio habits of mind, or Bill Lucas's foundation, or the 7 habits. And why would we do that? It's because looking at deeper structure allows us to generalize to next projects so that we can adapt or revise to improve what we're doing. So I want to think about three elements of art. This comes from the Arts Propel project at Project Zero at Harvard from the 1980s and early 90s. That project claimed that making is the center of artistic activity, and it's where everything comes from. Because we're making, it slows us down so that we think and perceive, have more time to think and perceive, and we also have more time to reflect. And all of those things influence each other and make for cycles of thinking that are based in making. So I'm going to use the work to connect some of the dots, because making connects doing to reasoning. This is a slide from Kimball and Stables in Goldsmith in England, and it really shows how it's a model of how we take a hazy impression in our mind, in our head, over on the left side, and then we do something with it outside of the head with the hand. And as we do that back and forth, you do something, you think about it, you do something else, you think about it, you go back and forth between the head and the hand. By revisiting and by keeping going, we get somewhere better. And that's what these projects have been set up to do. First of all, I want to talk about making and just put to rest this idea about skills. Making develops skills. These students at the LECOM school are learning to use skills related to woodworking. And these students who are at the Sun K primary are also developing skills, but in this case they're learning to take long strips of leaves, long leaves, and they were taught how to make them into these crickets. And in each case, the students are learning skills. They're learning how to control their hands, how to control their minds, how to focus, how to attend, and it holds them to the task because they are doing something. They're actively engaged. Making also promotes persistence. It builds the mental muscles that are needed to persist in difficult tasks so that students learn to work on the hard parts. A lot of times when things get hard, we sort of turn away, but making requires us to focus on the hard parts. This student from LECOM school keeps his focus, and he's trying over and over and over again. And that's a skill that's needed in any serious endeavor. These students are from two schools. One's from Lu Kuang Fei, and they are developing vocabulary to communicate differences in lines. And then also from St. Rose of Lima's, who are making sensory connections between musical sounds and visual lines. But they're both using observe and listen to unlock expressive possibilities. You can see that this is an experience that's low stakes in the stretch and explore kind of idea. So mistakes aren't really possible, which frees up creative thought. This student from St. Rose of Lima's school has responded personally to a group challenge, learning to express a unique and an individual interpretation. All the students got the same base, and they undertook the task individually all at the same time. But by putting their work together and seeing how other people are solving things differently from the same prompt, that contributes to, they see how they are part of a whole and how individuals add value to the collective. The idea of moving from 2D, from a flat surface to a round surface, a three-dimensional project, is a mind-boggling challenge. These boys from LECOM school are using sandpaper to express possible ways to do that. And this boy, also from LECOM, is exploring architectural possibilities with a different technology, the iPad. But they're both envisioning and imagining how to make three-dimensional work by planning in 2 dimensions first. At Lukong Fei School, a project is started with Rousseau's paintings from the Caribbean that led to observation and depicting elements of jungles or rainforests. And then they used repetition to develop the elements into full-grown rainforests, which is how Rousseau created his paintings. And finally, they turned it into a three-dimensional rainforest, each one on a separate one that were then combined. So you can see again this individual to collective as a way to work together and build understanding. Finally, making builds satisfaction because the work matters personally and it's hard. When something requires focus over a sustained period, when it requires skill development or unique expression of a student's intentions, their pride in completing the work is immense, and it raises their self-confidence. They see what they can do when they put in the effort. Now I want to move on to how making carries thought and allows students to think and perceive more. It gives thinking time. Making slows us down, and while our hands are working, our minds are also working, and we can begin to see connections, we can see challenges, we can see opportunities, we can see possibilities. So this student from St. Rose of Lima School, where they were using mathematics and visual arts and architecture to explore lines and patterns and colors and shapes and light and shadow through architecture. So they had to think about scale in their models and about the impact of space and architectural elements on the experiences of humans. That is a very challenging idea, but you can see this little person here. They were, in fact, thinking about the human experience in relationship to possibilities for architecture. Attention, 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 says the Zen master. Close looking and documentation are being used by this student from Sunkei Primary to observe and express or document her observations with her iPad. By doing this, she is slowing down her thinking and perceiving more of what's around her. She seeks what appeals to her, and so she finds what she values. In their iterative exploration of insects and butterflies, these students from Sunkei Primary are using an unfamiliar material to explore symmetry in design. That requires that stretch and explore habit that I was telling you about, a playful attitude that learns to use error as opportunity. Again, back at St. Rose of Lima, the students are wondering at how space impacts human experience. So they're thinking and they're perceiving more about safety and comfort and the ephemeral nature of place, how it changes, about being alone, about being powerful, about being joyful. All the emotions that they experience and all the thoughts about inside and outside and what changes the way you feel and the way you think. Similarly, this experiment with stacking books in an unusual way helps the students build new ideas about balance, about arches, about how physics works. And they also see many different results and how they can emerge from the same thing by exhibiting their work collectively. The butterfly project again. This is early on, the simple symmetry. But because the project went on for so long, it gave them time to make connections and to synthesize. So here they were thinking about symmetry, but here they were using the patterns that they'd seen on insect and butterfly wings to inspire them to make their own patterns, which they connected in a grid and then drew connecting lines to make the patterns go together. And then they took templates of butterflies and saw how they could move those around and get different kinds of patterns. A next opportunity would be to return to symmetry. How could we use these patterns and make symmetrical butterflies? Is that possible? The students might come up with all sorts of possibilities. The last part of the make, think, perceive, reflect is reflect. More time for focused thought because of the making. So reflect motivates us internally to think and wonder. These boys are thinking about making. They are in the early stages of the project at Tunmun Government School, and they're experimenting with paper strength. They folded paper and used it as a bridge, and now they're trying to see how much weight that bridge will hold by putting markers and other things on top of it. And you can see that they're reflecting as they're doing. They're thinking, what makes it strong? How strong is it? How can we check that? This is another reflection, in this case from a student from St. Rose of Lima School, thinking about the effect of light on space, because the making emphasized explorations of that. I love it that he says it's an eye-opener. Reflecting from making on making helps us find deeper meanings. This student from Lecom Primary reveals how close looking pushed his thinking into far reaches. Again, the slowing down is what allows us to go deeper. This student from Tunmun Government Primary School explored Chinese mythological characters to advance language skills. And this student from Lecom Primary explains how the making experiences advanced his vocabulary. But maybe for me the most important is the social emotional learning that these students experience. To be willing to invest in long-term projects and stewardship of place and community, we have to care about the topic. These art projects give students the time and space to become intimate with ideas, to fall in love with them. And that's why they might actually use them in other contexts. So the intention of this project, and this is my final slide, is to help teachers learn new ways of teaching by integrating art and another subject, so that students' creative and critical thinking is nurtured and developed. I hope you've seen through these examples how important and possible that shift is. But why is making that shift so hard? This is an explanation of that. When you begin to make a shift, you have a position right up here, a challenge, and it's your current practice, which is this line. You also have a goal, a solution, which is this creative classroom that you're trying to make, or this project that you're trying to learn about. So maybe in the beginning you have a few vague ideas about what you might do to get there that are not your standard practice, but you need experience. Remember the hand and the head diagram? You need to do things iteratively in order to fix that. So really, you have one or two experiences, but you need a lot of experiences. You need to have divergent thinking, many, many possibilities for how you might change. But divergent thinking, creative thinking, isn't enough by itself. Eventually, you have to select from the possibilities and turn them from exploring outward to converging on the solution, a solution you can live with and learn to love. You could call this the creativity diamond. It's how the creative process works and why the projects with the children had so many stages. But even the creativity diamond doesn't explain why it's so hard to change. the reason it's so hard to change is because of this space. This space is where the divergent thinking, the moving outward, has to turn toward convergent thinking. It has to select and it has to refine and select. And that is a very uncomfortable place. And you know you're in it because suddenly you'll hear yourself blaming in your mind. You might blame yourself. I can't do this. It's too hard for me. I'm afraid I'll fail. Or you might blame the project. The project is silly, and besides, it's impossible. No one could do it, and it misses the point anyway. You might blame the person who introduced the possibility to you, the task, the teacher. Why'd she even give us this? I hate it. I have too much to do, and it's a waste of my time. Or you might blame the materials. These pencils don't work. This scissors is stupid. I don't have time to organize all this stuff. You get the idea. This is why shifting to the creative classroom is hard. I used to think, we call this area the dis-ease, the area of dis-ease. And that's how you know you're in it when you're blaming. I used to think I'd eventually grow out of the area of dis-ease. I'd get mature and I wouldn't have to worry about all these blaming thoughts, but I never did. And your students never will either, and neither will you, because the disease area is always a part of the creative process. It always turns up. So what do we do about it? Well, we teach ourselves and our students to manage it. Notice when you're in it. Listen to those blamings. And then develop strategies for dealing with it. Strategies might be taking a break or going for a walk, getting a drink of water, talking to a friend or mentor, or writing a reflection. You might go work on something else, or you might turn on some lively music and do a dance break, or maybe you play with some other materials. There are lots of ways, and we need to remember to develop these strategies and notice when to use them, and then give ourselves time in the creative classroom to address them. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed talking with you today, and I hope that this is helpful for you in understanding why this project is so helpful and how it might develop over the next several years. Thank you so much. Goodbye.